Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so glad you've joined me for part 2 of our story tonight. And if you haven't heard part 1, make sure you click on the description to it because you don't want to miss out on this fabulous story. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 2 of our story. Farmer Wallace's account. Over the last couple of weeks, I had discovered a new uncharted side of my character that had clandestinely laid buried or quiescently dormant for years. It burst forward in my life like a tenacious weed when I was boiling with an unsuppressed lugubrious anger that I had tried desperately to contain. I didn't quite warm to this unprecedented, idiosyncratic, undiscovered part of myself, you could say, that I wasn't well acquainted with. Ostensibly, I'd never been a volatile man, given to capriciously angry or turbulent, belligerent outbursts. You could say most of my life I'd been like a steady, calm, serene ocean, without a ripple to be seen on the water, nor a dark cloud noticed on the distant horizon. My temper was consistently harmonious, but ever since my poor steer was attacked, it was almost as if an obscure door within me had inadvertently come off its hinges and was impossible to fix until you found a strong enough clasp to secure it together again. I noticed that all my steers, my dog and my family had seen a distinct change in me, and having never been exposed to such an arbitrary side of my character before, it was like they were viewing me with a rising level of trepidation and uncertainty, and even my wife had become wary of me of late, as if she had somewhat resigned herself to walking on eggshells for a while. The whole bodeful event began when I was woken to the sounds of my cattle mooing. They were making quite a commotion one night. They were grazing in a meadow close to the farmhouse, and I sat up with a start in my bed, knowing something was seriously wrong. I work with my steers every day of my life judiciously, managing the affairs of our ranch. I am familiar and very well acquainted with their behaviour. They are normally quite placid, inquisitive creatures with an easy-going disposition, taking life well in their stride. But on this inauspicious night, they were mooing a great deal more than usual. But there was an edge to those moos or bellows that I'd never heard before, almost like a silent, frantic cry for help. A call that I heard because I can tune in to their frequency quite easily. My heart was pounding violently in my chest as I quickly threw on my jeans and boots. I hastily scurried out the kitchen door, closing it quietly behind me, with the rifle in my hands and a torch on my head. My dog Jasper was faithfully following behind me, until his sensory receptors were alerted to something noxiously foul on the wind that his nose did not appreciate, so he refused to go any further. I left him whimpering beside the farmhouse, far from happy to have been abandoned by me. I'd never seen him so consumed by such a vacillating reluctance that was so profound it left him almost tethered to the farmhouse. For me, his obsequious, incongruous behaviour was an arbitrary warning sign for me to pay attention. Something was out there that had seriously sucked out my dog's exuberant enthusiasm. The motion-activated lights of our farmhouse were on, but in the meadow the moonlight was dim, obscured by a thick veil of foggy mist, so that even the stars had become like dull coins in the sky that had lost their lustre. I was somewhat bewildered to find all my steers gathered together rather tightly, like a cluster of grapes, much closer than they usually would be, and they appeared to be very afraid. Something was clearly irking them. In a trice, randomly appearing from behind a tree, I see one of my steers, whom had inadvertently become separated from the others, diving into the middle of the herd, where he assumed a safe position, as far away from the outer fringes of the herd as he could get. Let's just say at this point I hadn't observed that this was my injured bullock. I walk around the meadow rather patiently, holding a rifle in my hand, staring at the obscure silhouettes of the trees. The weather is pleasantly warm. There's a still, gentle breeze blowing, but it's very dark. And all the vegetation on our farm, the trees, the plants, anything you could say with a solid density, is locked in a tenebrous oblivion, so I'm not getting to see very much, nor have I heard a thing. I'm used to hearing the nightly chorus of crickets and frogs and their happy, pleasing trills being lifted up into the air, along with the occasional howl from a coyote or a hoot from an owl. But on this night it is so uncommonly quiet, apart from the anguished moos of my bullocks. And this quietness, well, it's not natural. It's as if even the subdued night knows that what is lurking within its mist is far from favourable. I have the most god-awful chill running down the back of my spine. I have an overwhelming sense that I am not alone, that I am being watched. The feeling is so discomposing, so unsettling, so disturbing. It sends a chaotic churning feeling in my gut that feels as if all my insides are being tied up together into hundreds and hundreds of knots. I pull out the slender torch from my jeans pocket that is very bright, and I plunder its brightness over the trees and over the meadow. And that is when I see a pair of red eyes, about 7 feet off the ground, staring at me. But the moment I've seen those eyes, they're suddenly gone. I fire my rifle in the direction of whatever this thing is, but it's gone. My shots bounce into the night with an ear-piercing, whipping, cracking sound. Whatever it was exceedingly big, and I was instinctively convinced that it was somehow connected to scaring my steers half to death. But as to what this ambiguous thing was, I could not imagine. It was the next morning I was to discover one of my steers had been badly scratched, and let's just say it provoked within me an anger that just bubbled to the surface because I felt I was fighting an invisible foe, and that is a very helpless feeling indeed. One day when my wife was grocery shopping in town and my children were at school, I received a visitor to my farm. My face lit up immediately when I saw Lydia Henderson climbing out of her truck, as I knew exactly what she was doing here, and I'd almost been expecting a visit from her. She was every part the quintessential Colorado cowgirl, wearing jeans, cowboy boots, and a cowboy hat. She's also a rancher on her husband's farm, and is good friends with my wife. But it was not my wife she had come to visit, it was me. And by the looks of the expression on her face, she had something rather pressing on her mind. And I thought I knew what it was. "Howdy, Wallace. How's it going with you?" she asks me, giving me a bright twinkling smile. "Good to see you. Dr. Kruger told me about your steer being scratched up. Mind if I see the damage? I'm very interested, you see, if it's similar to what happened to our steer." I knew this was why she was here. It would seem that I was not alone in the heaped level of frustration I felt about the ambiguous predator in our midst. "Please come this way," I say, leading her through the meadow towards my large herd of bullocks. "You have a very impressive herd here, Wallace. They're all in great condition." "Wait until you see Mr. Butterfield and his very interesting scar. I'm very glad to tell you he's getting much better. He's also calmed down significantly. He was really scared for a while. Really, you know, rather nervous, you could say." "You name your steers?" she asks, raising a brow and letting out a light laugh that rolls off her tongue. "No, I don't. But he earned a name, didn't he, after what he went through, poor thing." "Careful you don't get too attached," she teases. "I'm always attached to my steers. What do you mean by that? They're all very important to me, you know." Lydia runs her hand down the angry scar on the side of my steer. "Oh, this is nasty, very nasty," she says, grimacing. "It's exactly the same kind of scar that I've got on my steer. And no question of a doubt, the same animal has attacked him." She let out a loud sigh. "Oh, I wish to God we could kill the bugger." "Would you like a coffee, Lydia? I assure you it's no problem at all. I was even going to put one on for myself anyway." "Now you're speaking my language, Wallace. That would be absolutely great. I fancy a cup." Lydia sits down on one of the chairs at our kitchen table. She removes her cowboy hat and runs her hand through her mane of blonde curls to revitalise them. I notice that her hair, like mine, gets considerably flattened by her hat. I notice she's playing with her fingers awkwardly, giving me the sense that she wants to say something, and is deliberately withholding it, as if wondering whether it's a good idea or not. It's a lovely kitchen you've got here, Wallace. I know she's stalling, as Lydia has about as much interest in a kitchen than I do in learning how to make a chocolate cake. She's a woman who's born to embrace the outdoors, and the design of a kitchen has about as much interest to her as watching paint dry. She watches me perform my magic on the coffee machine. I like it, she says. It's very rustic. It's got a traditional farmhouse feel about it, with a modern twist. Like old meeting new, if you know what I mean. It's Alice for you. She's quite a traditional girl, really. Enjoys many of the old ways. She even makes her own butter, you know. You're kidding me. How does she do that? How does anyone do that? She whips the cream to a state when it begins to separate, and then it becomes butter. It's very good stuff, too, after the salt is actually added. Would you like froth on your milk, Lydia? Of course. What do you take me for, Wallace? She laughs. I may be a cowgirl, but I like my frills, and I like my coffee frothy. Very frothy. Sugar? Oh, no, I'm sweet enough, but I wouldn't say no to a spoon of honey if you've got one going. I think we can help there, I say, passing her a jar of honey and a spoon, and then I hand her the coffee and sit down opposite her with my coffee, watching her spoon the honey into her cup. She holds the mug in both her hands as if warming them up, and then takes a reassuring sip. You do make a good cup of coffee, Wallace. I'll give you that. Remind me to visit you more often for a tete-a-tete. I could get used to this. It's the coffee machine, not me. It's espresso di Valetti. Well, that's what I believe it's called, although I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It's a deep, rich coffee, great served with frothy milk. I pause for a moment, because I'm not exactly the most gregarious, chatty person, but I know that Lydia is keeping something from me, and I want to know exactly what it is. Lydia, I hope this is not presumptuous of me, but I sense you want to tell me something, but you're reluctantly holding back. Please don't. If you do know something about the predator that attacked our steers, I would sure like to know all about it. But would you really, Wallace? She says, raising a questionable brow. Sometimes it's best not to know your enemy. Are you kidding, Lydia? That's where I heartily disagree with you, I have to say. It helps when you know exactly what you are fighting. It's in the not knowing that is the most perilously dangerous. I can assure you of that. That's why in World War II, getting intelligent information from that enigma machine meant that they were able to decipher, translate, and interpret the contents of the enemy's messages. It was crucial for the success of the war effort, you know. They needed to know the enemy's plans in order to win the war. The dangerous thing is always the not knowing your enemy. It is the element of surprise that has won many wars. Think about the Trojan horse and all the soldiers hidden within it. I mean, what do they say? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, so you are always in the know. Nothing catches you off guard, as your eyes are on the dodgy ball that you don't trust, and you watch those balls like a hawk, never missing a beat. Very well put, Wallace. You're not just a handsome face. You're absolutely right. But there is a quintessentially rather big problem here, in the knowing, that is, that I have to impart to you. And what is that problem? That you may not believe me. My husband is a doubting Thomas, and he's certainly doubting my account. He keeps sweeping me with doubt, you know. Are you sure, Lydia? Maybe you imagined it, Lydia. You can't be right, Lydia. You know, that kind of thing. But I know, Wallace. I know what I saw. Well, I'm open-minded enough to give your story the benefit of the doubt. Why don't you try me? I confess I saw something in the woodgrove 7 feet off the ground, with red eyes glowing at me. So something was definitely out there. Oh, my God! You saw it! Why didn't you tell me? She says, cupping her hands over her mouth in astonishment. I've been sitting here stewing in my own juices, wondering if I should tell you. And all along you've actually seen it. Maybe you can tell that husband of mine that I'm not actually losing my mind. To be fair, Lydia, I didn't actually see it. I mean, it could have been anything, couldn't it? I saw it 1 second.
It was gone the next, but I did shoot at it, I'll tell you that.
But what would have red eyes 7 feet off the ground, Wallace? Tell me that. What could you have seen? There are no natural animals out there that tall, with the exception, of course, of a bear standing on its hind legs. And to be fair, a black bear on his hind legs is approximately 7 foot tall. But a grizzly bear, let's think for a moment. Yes, a grizzly bear on his hind legs would be approximately 8 to 10 foot tall. But then again, they've been locally extinct here in Colorado since 1951. So the only other animal that tall could only be a black bear on its hind legs. But this was no black bear. Besides, their eye shine is like a yellowish colour, isn't it? Well, that's when you shine a light on them. But this thing had red eyes. Nasty, vindictive, evil-looking red eyes. Eyes you can't forget in a hurry.
You tell me then what you think you saw.
That's the problem. I wish I bloody knew, Wallace. But I can't get the horrifying, haunting image out of my head. Put it this way, you can't unsee a creature like that.
Well, describe it to me.
Well, I'm a light sleeper, you see. That husband of mine can sleep through a tsunami and a hailstorm and wouldn't be woken up at all. Believe me, if there's anything going on at the ranch during the night, my husband will be the last to know about it. She pauses for a moment, tapping her short pink fingernails against the warm mug. I'm also an instinctive person, always have been. I woke up in the middle of the night by an instinct rather than a noise. Our very large cattle herd was in a pasture quite a way away from the farmhouse. They like to hang around the trees there, sticking together, you know. They're protective like that.
I nod. You mean your instincts concern the bullocks? I ask, looking nonplussed. Are you really that in tune with them?
Yes, I am in tune, but not so much the bullocks. I just get a sense when something was off. You see, I'm a rancher, so if anything doesn't feel exactly right, the first thing I do, as naturally as brushing my teeth in the morning, is to check on the herd. Over and above everything else, I check on the herd. You see, I trust my instincts, and when something is not right, I just know it in here, she says, pointing to her gut. I wasted no time. I quickly got dressed and hurried towards the meadow with my rifle. I swear to you, Wallace, it was dead out there. And I mean dead. Really dead. It was so quiet. You couldn't have heard a sound. But as I got closer to the steers, they were making the weirdest bellowing low-frequency noise, unlike anything I've ever heard before. It was very unsettling. I could feel those steers were frightened. I've never seen them behave like that before, and they were all looking at one specific spot, so I quickly followed their gaze.
You're recounting almost word for word exactly what happened to me, I reflect. My herd was making a very strange low-pitched mooing sound, I have to say. Actually, the word you use is much more appropriate. Bellow is better. Or even braying or brawling would be a much more appropriate description.
That was when I saw it, Wallace. It was standing there, this grotesque, macabre creature. It turned around and looked directly at me. But I chose not to look into its eyes. Something warned me not to look into those eyes. I don't know why, but I just got this feeling that if I did, I'd live to regret it. But this thing was hideously ugly, vile-looking. The moonlight was excellent that night, which was a dreadful pity. And along with the light of my torch, I hasten to say I was not spared the indignity of seeing this hideous creature in all its glory. I swear to you, Wallace, it was enjoying my shocked revulsion and abhorrent horror. It perceived I was appalled in seeing something as ghastly as he was. It was wallowing in my fear, basking in it, if you like. You know, I don't even know if this thing was actually intent on willfully harming our steers. I think it wanted to frighten the hell out of them, like some warped, insidious nightly entertainment it was having at their expense. Wallace, I promise you, this thing was having so much fun. He was having the time of his life. I know it sounds crazy, I know it sounds nonsensical, but I promise you, it was actually laughing. And I'm not kidding either. And when he saw me, I think I became the cherry on his birthday cake. Something else he could actually terrorise. and he took a great deal of delight in doing just that. This thing was tenacious, vindictive, nasty, and malevolent to its very core.
So you don't think it wanted to harm the steers?
For a start, if he really wanted to kill that steer, the one that he scratched up, I doubt it would have been a problem for him. Whatever this thing is, granted it scratched the steers, but I believe it just wanted to do that to engender fear in the herd. It gets off in scaring the living daylights out of you. It enjoys terrorizing animals and people. My guess is it probably feeds on much smaller prey, like raccoons or squirrels. So I'm not worried about this thing killing our herd. I'm worried about the stress he's causing to them. That's my huge issue, because we all know stress can kill, and kill badly too.
So what did this thing actually look like?
It looks like something you'd expect to find in hell, like a demon should look. Although this thing was not supernatural, it was real like you or me. It had the body of a human being, the head of a wolf. And I know this sounds warped and far-fetched and fanciful, but it had 2 rows of teeth. I'd say the head was much larger than your average wolf. Put 2 or 3 of those heads together, maybe 4, to make one head. I noticed the creature was thin, muscular. It had broad shoulders covered with dense, thick, dark hair. And I noticed there was all this blood all over its mouth. He was the most hideous thing I have ever seen. At a guess, I'd say he was about 7 foot tall, maybe 500 pounds, possibly more. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he had a very large tail like a wolf or German shepherd. Exactly like that, only infinitely bigger.
What did you do?
Well, you know, Wallace, I was frozen to the spot. A while ago, my cat brought in a baby rabbit from the meadow, and I wondered why the hell this little rabbit wouldn't run away. Even when I let it out, releasing him from my cat's clutches, it remained frozen for quite a while, shaking, until it suddenly realized it was free, and then it bounced away. And I remember thinking that was odd behavior. I would have thought it would run away at once, immediately. But now I know, Wallace. Now I know what it's like to feel so much fear that your body becomes catatonic, and it even paralyzes your natural adrenal and cortisol reactions, which become incapacitated and non-responsive. That was me all over.
Bloody hell! That's not good. You must have been freaking out.
I was, but it was like this long, distant voice at the back of my head that seemed to be calling me from a long way away. It sounded like my mother's voice, very familiar. And get this, she's been dead for 10 years. I heard her voice saying, "Run, Lids! Run, Lids!" She's the only person who ever called me Lids in life. It kind of caught on when I was little, because my parents complained tirelessly that I had this annoying habit of never putting the lids back onto jars and tubs. Anyway, that helped me snap out of my stunned stupor, and I fired after this creature with my rifle. But Wallace, this thing could run, and none of my bullets got him. I hasten to say, I'm an excellent shot too. Lydia looks at me through earnest round blue eyes. You do believe my story, Wallace, do you not?
I do, I say solemnly. I do. It fits the bill of what is attacking our steers. And I'm of the opinion there are things out there that can't always be explained. The question is, Lydia, what are we going to do about this thing? Even if it isn't intent on killing our livestock, it wants to cause them immeasurable stress. What are we going to do? Do you know I heard this true story once? A man was locked in a freezer that was not actually on, but it was cold in that unit, so he falsely believed he would freeze to death, and the stress caused him to have a heart attack. The worst part of it all was that the freezer unit wasn't locked, and even if he had slept in it all night, it would have been fine. It wouldn't have killed him. But the accumulative stress about the impending doom he faced caused him to have a grievous heart attack and subsequently die. That's stress for you. Stress is very unkind.
Bloody hell, that's a terrible story. We have to kill this creature, Wallace. Somehow we need to take this creature down. Both our ranchers have been harassed by this god-awful thing. It seems to be adverse to our trail cameras, so my suggestion is you take yours down one night. And on that night in question, Keep patrolling the meadows every 20 minutes or so, as clandestinely as you can, as you want to catch this thing off guard, so it's not expecting you. You can't let him know you're there. I'll do it the following night after you. Put your trail cameras back after that. We can alternate on this approach, so we can get some sleep on alternative nights. How good of a shot are you with your rifle?
Quite good, actually.
Well, that's a good start. All I can say is don't focus on the creature, Wallace. Just shoot it straight away. Don't give it the opportunity to play any mind games with you, because believe you me, it will. This thing is sharp, it's clever, it's intelligent, and don't you dare look into those eyes. Those eyes of his have got some kind of power. I'm not sure what it is, but you can't afford to look in his eyes.
I'll tell you what, I'll do it tonight. This afternoon I'm going to take all my trail cameras down, and I'll go out patrolling every 20 minutes like you suggest. We've got to get this thing. The trail cameras have been a deterrent, but eventually that creature will figure them out.
Great. You do tonight, and let me know if you have any luck. Believe me, you're going to need lots of it.
That afternoon I took down the trail cameras that I'd erected around the trees and fences overlooking the pastures where the animals grazed. That evening, after my wife had gone to bed, I told her I was staying up to watch sports on television. This is something I never normally do. I gave our dog Jasper 2 antihistamines that are powerful sedatives to ensure he slept deeply, as I didn't want him to be alerted to my nightly adventure, if you can call it that. My wife was more than a little perturbed, as she knew how physically exhausted I am as a cattle rancher, and so for me to be remaining up did make her raise a questionable eyebrow. You sure you're all right, sweetheart? It's not like you to not want to come to bed all of a sudden. I really want to see this boxing match,
I lied to her. Until then, I'd never expressed much of an interest in boxing at all. You do surprise me. Since when have you been interested in boxing? She asked gingerly, giving me a scathing look.
I just heard this boxer. Well, he's got very good moves, I believe.
What's his name?
I can't remember. I think it's Tyson Fury. That's right, it's Tyson Fury.
My wife doesn't look very convinced, but luckily she doesn't ask me any more awkward questions. I really don't want her to know about the creature Lydia Henderson encountered. It would cause her no end of worry. That night things seemed so prevailingly ordinary. Nothing about the night possessed any sense of foreboding, and I really began to feel as if my regular 20-minute patrols were completely fruitless. I was glad this was not my personal job. Truly, I have great sympathy for anyone who works night shift or is on guard duty. My eyelids were becoming droopy and heavy, and I was becoming increasingly fatigued. It was almost impossible to keep my eyes open, but I was exceedingly determined to see this through. It was at 2 o'clock in the morning when everything changed. I went out on my nightly patrol, and the silence was muzzled, its ominous stillness alerting me to the fact that our evil nighttime visitor had returned. It seemed removing the trail cameras had invited him right back onto the premises with open arms, to subject my bullocks to his hunger games. But the air was polluted with a stench of rotting flesh. There wasn't a sound, not a cricket or frog to be heard, not a distant call of a coyote, daring to inject the silence with even a sound, for their tuneful choruses had been censored by the foreboding presence of an iniquitous evil that you could tangibly feel, for it defiled and contaminated the meadow with its dark, insidious energy. All I could hear was my boots clandestinely moving towards the pastures, as discreetly as I possibly could, so that the sounds of my boots had become very loud. I climbed beneath the spaces of the fence and trudged over the dew-covered grass. But then I could hear the bellowing sound of my steers, and that unfamiliar anger bubbled up inside me all over again. I moved skillfully between the trees to take up my silent position. The moonlight was generous, and she needed to be to help me with this unforgiving task I had at hand. I needed nature to magnanimously assist me in removing this blight from the landscape, this corrupt, vile, treacherous being. It was then that I saw it, and for a brief moment nothing prepared me for what I was beholding. It was like I could not believe what I was actually seeing.
As Lydia Henderson had rightly conjectured, there's nothing like this that you can actually prepare for some things you just can't unsee. And believe me, no one would want to feast their eyes on such depravity. The creature was like a demon, half human, half wolf, absolutely gargantuan, covered in dense hair, with human-like hands that wore the nail-like appendages that reminded me of sharp knives. The creature was moving towards my steers, who were clustered so tightly together, their eyes pinned on this horrifying beast that appeared to be laughing at them. I knew Lydia was right. The creature was not in my meadow to attack one of my bullocks for an easy meal. Not at all. No, not at all. He was here for some nightly entertainment. He was here to enjoy himself. It brought him great excitement to subject my bullocks to a paralysing fear. He seemed to thoroughly enjoy doing that. My hands were shaking on the trigger of my rifle. I was so angry. I wanted to get a shot without hurting any of my steers, and this was not going to be an easy endeavour. Even the sounds of gunshots would be upsetting for them, and also for my sensitive ears that hated the booming sound of my rifle. Then something remarkable happened that completely caught me off guard. I am hit with the astounding revelation that something else has been quietly stalking this wolf-like humanoid. And there were two of these creatures. They looked like human giants covered in hair with human-like faces, and both fortuitously jumped the wolf-like humanoid so that he fell back on the ground. The creature could not react. He couldn't fight back. All those advanced privileges had been stolen from him, as he had been blindly oblivious to his enemy, the enemy in his midst, that had an advantage over him, and it happened as quickly as swatting a fly. The male Bigfoot began to stamp the creature's head underneath his foot so that it broke like an egg, and it was over for him. The wolf-like being literally was gone. All this happened so quickly, and even my steers moved forward to gather around the dead wolf-like humanoid to examine the thing that had caused them so much grief. They were relieved to see that it would not be in a position to scare them any more. They didn't seem bothered by the two large hairy humanoids that I realised at once were Bigfoots, which made me wonder if my steers were actually familiar with the creatures. The male Bigfoot picked up the wolf-like creature's body, throwing it over his large shoulders, and he and the female Bigfoot began to chat backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. I sensed they were saying, "That was easy," and then they were gone, just like that. I had to rub my eyes in disbelief, like a movie clip that happens so fast you have to rewind it back again and again to make sure that it really happened as you thought it did. But I unequivocally knew that it actually had. Suffice to say, life reverted back to normal for Lydia Henderson's family, and for mine as well. But after learning about my children's account, I knew that those Bigfoot were a big blessing to our lives. So every Christmas and Easter, I leave a basket of goodies out for them in the woodgrove. My way of saying thanks. I'm so glad that they're out there, and they're watching over my farm and over my steers. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.